I know Commissioner Chambers has been our vice chairman, I think, a couple of years, and also our interim chairman, and has served a lot of dedicated years, and I appreciate that. And just looking at other structures on a lot of different boards, I think you see a lot of the different board members that typically rotate, or you have others that are used for consideration. And I know that Commissioner Lee has been on the board a number of years. Is it 8 years, Commissioner, or 8 years? And I just think it would be a great opportunity to, allow another member to, have an opportunity as well. So that was the reason for me, selecting Commissioner Lee.
Okay, seeing and hearing no other further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed?
Approved 5-0.
Okay. Item 9.2 is a consideration of an appointment to the Board of Elections and Registration. This is the one I removed earlier. Item 9.3, a consideration of a rental agreement with the Georgia State Properties Commission for the use of the Alms House by the Georgia Department of Driver Services. I'm going to call on Stacy Blackman again to review the agreement. But first, I wanted to give you all a little bit of history. I did not know this earlier. I've always known the building as the Driver Services. I did not realize it was the Alms House. So another building that the county owns, that we were very, very lucky back in 2004 when Chairman Robert Barr was able to negotiate Driver Services staying here in Carroll County. As some of you may remember, it was up at the Georgia State Patrol office up there in Villa Rica. The front part was Driver Services, the back was the Georgia State. So the fact is the county almost lost it. So I'm very, very excited that we still have it here, and how lucky we are that we've got this building that if we didn't have Driver Services in, we might be driving to another county. So anyway, Stacy, I'll let you go over the rental agreement stuff.
Sure, thank you. This is a renewal of the existing rental agreement, and with the exact same terms as the existing rental agreement. The State Properties Commission rents the property for 1-year terms, so they have the first year would start July 1st, and the state would have the right to renew it for up to 8 terms of 1 year each. And there's nominal consideration. The state pays the utilities and janitorial services. Commissioner Camp did have a good question about insurance, and the state agreed to add some clarification language that they do provide liability coverage for their own officers and members pursuant to the State Tort Claims Act. So that's not in your draft, but they've agreed to add that language. I think that's all I have on that.
Okay, I'll take a motion in a second, and then we can have discussion and questions.
I'll make a motion to present with the amendments that the legal counsel mentioned.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, maybe primarily for Stacy, maybe. But I wanted to understand a couple of things. One is the liability, but in addition to liability from the occupying agency or the tenant, would that include customers who use the facility and that kind of thing?
The proposed language does say that the tenant or occupying agency would provide liability coverage for up to $1 million per person or $3 million per occurrence for liability due to their own officers or members or invitees.
Okay. And I'll throw out another couple of points. This is, of course, as you know, my first full term, so I haven't come across this rental agreement before, but I'm really not one to advocate business as usual until I'm convinced. So you can readily convince me, I suppose. But I understand driver services is an advantage to have in the county. I mean, that's great, or in Carrollton particularly, that's great. I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, if we didn't have this building, would they locate it in Griffin? I mean, I just don't know how far-fetched it could possibly be, but I mean, they would try to put it, I would think, in population centers of a county anyway. But is it typical for, I guess my main question is, and I know it's what we have done in the past evidently, and it's just an annual renewable thing, but to throw out another concept, is it typical for counties to provide basically free of charge, because the rent is $10 a year or something, a driver services facility? In other words, what's happening? I don't know the industry. What's happening out there? Do other counties do this, or are we doing a typical thing? Or for a 6,400 square foot facility, could we charge at least some nominal amount of usual rent, whatever that would be, I'll just throw out a figure, $500 a month or something, to recoup some costs? Because the other thing that I noticed in the contract is that repairs, I mean, the first part of the sentence sounds real good, but the second part pretty much negates all of the first. So it says, during the term, the landlord shall be responsible for replacing and keeping in good order and repair, except repairs necessitated by the willful misconduct of the tenant. So I don't imagine there's going to be willful misconduct of the tenant in hardly any case, unless they leave a pot on the stove and it burns down or something. But repairs then are basically the county's responsibility. So what I see in this from a financial perspective, just being new to it, is we're providing the building, and then we're providing all the repairs to it basically for free to the state. And we get the advantage of having driver services in our county, true, but A, is that the industry standard? Is that what happens in other counties? And B, if we did charge rent, would the state up and move the facilities to Meriwether? I mean, how far-fetched are they going to be? I mean, I think they would want to keep it around here anyway. So in other words, are we losing money by not charging at least a reasonable rental fee and being responsible for repairs? That's what I got from just glossing over the contract. I don't know the answer. Possibly we'd want to table approving this until next month. I mean, since it doesn't start until July, to get an answer to those questions. I don't know, or maybe my questions are not feasible.
Ms. Blackman, in the contract, does it technically state that this would not be needed until July 1? Is that correct?
The term would start July 1, but I should have probably brought up in paragraph 5, they did agree to state that the tenant is responsible for repairs needed for the gross negligence or willful misconduct of the tenant, the occupying agency, or invitees. And I don't know the industry standard, but I would point out that Section 8 does say that any of the parties have the right to terminate the lease on 120 days prior written notice. So you can terminate it. They could terminate it as well if for some reason you need to. So that's the information I have for you.
Okay, but that basically still leaves us in a situation where repairs, unless it's negligence on the tenant's part, would still be ours. I mean, we're getting ready to put hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of repairs into our defect building and everything else for just normal wear and tear on the roof and so on. So, yeah. I mean,
Commissioner, I would be willing to, based off your questions and comments, I'd be willing to amend my motion to table this until the next following regularly scheduled meeting in February, since legal counsel has advised us it's technically does not need to be enforced until July, if that would give you some time for staff to work with you to look into that. I'd be willing to amend the motion to table it.
And we can still do that. Susan, did you have a comment?
I was just going to add a little institutional knowledge here.
Yeah.
When the State Patrol and the Department of Motor Vehicles and this driver services separated out, that's when this all came about. Haralson County was a strong recruiter. They were offering all kinds of things. Commissioner Barr felt like this was not only a convenience for the citizens to have it here in Carroll County, it was an economic issue too, because these people that come from all these other counties into Carroll County, they buy lunch or they shop or do whatever they're doing while they're here. And that's why he made that commitment. But there were Haralson and I believe 2 other counties that were very competitive about trying to move the location.
Polk was one they ended up getting theirs, because that's where they got these drivers.
That's right, they got, but anyway, just so you know what was the thought back then when they were doing it. And also, they are paying all their expenses. If Charles sends his folks to repair something, then they go and repair it, and we bill them for the cost of the material or whatever's needed in there.
Commissioner, I don't know if I'll have a second or not, but I'll ask you, would you like for me to amend the motion to table it, or are those satisfactory answers?
Well, I still have the questions, I guess. So.
Okay, well, I don't know if someone will second, but I'm willing to amend the motion to allow it to be, the item to be tabled until the following month in February.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to table 9.3, the rental agreement with the Department of Driver Services, to the February 2nd, I believe, is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
meeting, so we can get some further answers.
Okay.
All right. Is there any further discussion or any questions? Okay, all those in favor of tabling? Any opposed?
Motion approved, 5-1.
All right, 9.4 is a public hearing and consideration to abandon a portion of Ringer Road. Before we start the public hearing, I'm going to call on Stacy Blackman again to review this resolution. Stacy?
Thank you. I'm sorry I had it on mute. Yes, this is a resolution. You may recall that last month the Board of Commissioners approved the resolution to begin the process of abandoning a portion of Ringer Road, which is a dirt road and a cut-through road. And there was a staff report that there were no staff concerns with the proposed abandonment. Since that time, we've run the necessary ad in the paper for this legal hearing and sent notices to the owners on the road. So, and the applicants, the Wilkinsons, have agreed that if the abandonment's approved, they will grant the necessary easement for school buses to turn around. So I think that's the information about the abandonment, and so you can hold the public hearing at this time.
Okay, I'm now going to call the public hearing to order. Is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor or against this? I'll ask again, is there anyone in favor that would like to speak on the Ringer Road abandonment? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. 9.4 is the Ringer Road abandonment. I will ask for a motion and a second to approve a consideration of a resolution to authorize the abandonment of a portion of Ringer Road measuring 1.48 acres and lying in land lot 31, District 11 of Carroll County.
Motion approved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions or any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed?
Motion approved, 6-0.
Great, thank you. Now, 9.5 is a consideration of an increase in the county share of the purchase price for an agricultural conservation easement on property located at 520 Bear Creek Road. I'm now going to call on County Engineer Brian Kent, and we also have our county attorney on the phone to go over the program and this request.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, 2018, there were 3 applicants that came before the board to be approved for submittal to the state for federal funding of agricultural land easements. Through the process of getting to the point of where we are and the closing process, there was a final appraisal done on each of the 3 properties. The final property, the property before you, had an increase of the final appraisal, and the county share went up to $21,547.62. So before you is the approval to expend that additional amount of SPLOST funds to match what the final appraisal would be for this property.
Do I have a motion and a second?
Can I ask a question?
Let's do the motion in a second,
Okay.
then we'll have discussion and questions.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented with an additional $21,547.62.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now, any questions or discussion?
Just one, so, just a point, what happens if we don't approve it?
In my opinion, the property owner would get no more than what was previously approved. The county share at the time of approval in 2018 was $168,452.38, with the additional $21,547.62 not being matched by Carroll County.
Mr. Kent, you and I had a discussion before the meeting, and you were able to answer several of the questions. Essentially, as I understand it, the process has to begin somewhere, and it's technically been precedent for the county to understand that the final appraisal is essentially where the process ends. Is that correct? In other words, those are the numbers that we would assume that we would want to think are fair and balanced, if you will, because somewhere the process had to end. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, sir. There's a preliminary approval that starts the process that is funded by the applicants, the landowners themselves, and through the process and going through getting up to the closing, there is a final appraisal that is allowed to ensure that there is value on the property. So that's what this final appraisal is doing, to meet that there is value and goes to the federal funds, because the federal funds is 50% of the share, the county is 25% of it.
If that value went down, it would actually be a decrease in our part. Is that correct?
It would be a decrease. There's a decrease in the other ones of, one of them is $737 decrease, and one is a $4,800 decrease thereabouts. So it goes up, it goes down.
The additional comment I'd like to make, I'm in favor and support of this. We definitely want to do what we can to promote agriculture and its conservation in our community. The only thing that I would notate is that this process, based off the precedent that we are undertaking, is a gamble for the county as well. So in other words, yes, if the property values had gone down, then they would have gone down. But let's say they went up $150,000. You would have been here this evening asking us for $150,000 instead of $21,547. So that's not a comment of right or wrong or indifferent on your part. That's just a statement that the board, I think, would need to understand that in some fashion, this is a viable process that does have liabilities.
And as far as the appraisal process, is this based on one appraisal or an average of several, or the lowest?
How the process works, applicants come in and have a discussion, and then they will fund, an appraiser will come out. An appraiser comes out and will do a preliminary appraisal, and that preliminary appraisal will usually establish a range, $5,000 range of what that easement value is. They take the value of its current use of property, and they take it at its highest and best use, whatever that highest and best use may be determined to be. The difference between the highest and best use and its current use, agriculture, that is what we're funding. That is the federal fund and the county fund. That is what's being funded. You're being paid for your development rights. So that range is established at that preliminary appraisal. And then over the course of getting all the paperwork done and getting to the closing, and this process is about 2 years, a closing appraisal is which establishes the final value of the easement. And that's where we are right now. The final appraisal has been done, and in this case, for one of these applicants, it did increase. So that's where we are.
Who selects the appraiser?
The property owners select them, but I have one appraiser has done, we hold 9 easements right now throughout the county, about 1,700 acres. One appraiser has pretty much done them all. We've had one appraiser out of Athens who has done them. A local appraiser I've had discussions with has not done it, but we've had one appraiser who's done all of them to date.
Okay, so you know that the same appraiser did all 3 of these?
The same appraiser did all 3 of these.
Okay.
Commissioner Chambers, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you're probably the most knowledgeable about this line. Is there anything else that we would need to consider as a board that's not been discussed, or?
Nothing more. Brian's done an excellent job. If I had to go back and do it over again, we wouldn't have been the guinea pigs, because I lost money doing it. But that wasn't the point. The point is we're trying to preserve agricultural land for future generations. That being said, I don't see anything substantive that has been missed. It's been the precedent, the process has been followed ever since we began this back in 97, I think.
I think it probably discussion started then, but officially around 2002, I
Right,
believe.
when we first signed, so, yeah, and I will say that Carroll County was the guinea pig for the state of Georgia, and Oconee County, Muskogee County, Fulton County, but South Fulton County, Fayette County, the other places, other counties that have gone into this. Now, they do not have the amount of land, acreage that Carroll County has preserved, but they used our template, and it seems to have worked fairly well for them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any further questions or discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Motion approved 6-0.
Okay, now we have 9.6, the RFP process, and Commissioner Reynolds, I will turn it over to you for your comments.
Okay. I just
Thank you, Brian.
wanted to see if we could briefly discuss this, just because it was brought up a few months ago, and we wanted to see if we could establish some type of a process so that major contracts, not contracts for $10,000 or something, but some of the major contracts of the county would be periodically put out for RFP, and kind of the catalyst that started this was the general liability contract that was not put out for RFP for, 7 years or some longer period of time. And since that time, we've been talking about that, and I know as far as that particular contract is concerned, we've got to allow a good bit of time for insurance agencies or whatever, several months of time for them to get their bid together. But even before that, we've got to develop the process for that. And two of the things that were discussed informally among us was that we need to ensure that it's a closed bid, sealed bid process, so that bids aren't leaked out to competitors. And the other thing is that we need to prevent a situation where, as I understand it in the insurance industry, an insurance broker can call one of the 5 or 6 or some very limited number of insurance entities, I'll just call them, I don't know what, and they can request a cost from them, and in that request process, that locks them from being used by any other broker. So we need to ensure that some manipulation like that doesn't occur, like it, I hear, occurred several years ago. So anyway, I just wanted to see if we could get some type of process started, or at least kicked around among us this evening, so that we don't wait until the next month and then say, hey, let's start looking at the RFP process. Because if Theron's going to be involved in that at all, he'd need to get on board and so on. So I believe our liability insurance renewal comes up in July. If insurance agencies need at least 3 or 4 months to get that together, we're right on the cusp of needing to start that. And so I guess my first point is to say, would it be possible, or what would y'all think about getting Theron started on looking into that like he did on the health insurance side?
Well, I've already discussed it with Theron, and we're going to do the same thing we did last year. I thought that worked very well. Him putting the RFP together, because he has such a wealth of information.
Yeah.
How he wrote it, and he did, if you remember back in the RFP process, he did assure that other companies could not lock in prices. And we did do the sealed bid, so all that was in the original one for the health insurance.
Okay.
So the plan is to start that also and do the same thing like we did last year, have a committee put together, not necessarily with the employees that we did this time, more of people who are involved in property and casualty, or whichever contract y'all want to look at, depending on who it is. If it's solid waste, we obviously want Charles, probably property and casualty, we might want you, somebody from the sheriff's department. So that process is already, but we're going to start that in July and do the same timeline that we did last year. So it will start July 2021. Yes, 2021. And about in the November meeting, we will be choosing the property and casualty person again, like we did this year, so they can go to market for us for the July 2022. It's too late right now to bring a broker on right this moment. We would not have the time to do the due diligence of interviewing them, and then they would be scrambling in the last 2 weeks trying to get bids for us. So that's the timeline I have for the property and casualty. Is there another contract y'all are interested in that you would like me to look at, and we'll back that that time frame, so we can make sure we have it on the docket going forward?
I remember, Madam Chairman, you correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think we were going to discuss this at a couple of different work sessions, and we've just run out of time.
Oh, we run out of time,
We
don't
have
we?
very good, productive work sessions that I've enjoyed, or the retreats, excuse me,
Yes.
work sessions at the retreats, but we've run out of, so I think there was a planning time that we were all going to, to look at this. I think from my perspective, I don't know that I have anything in mind as far as we want to send this out or we don't, but I think we need to look at these on an annual basis. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that we have to send it out to bid every year, but in other words, if I'm putting in a bid on the general liability, and I've heard the board say that we'd like to send this out to bid every 3 years, we can set that schedule up, but we may want to change it up the next year and say we're going to do a surprise change in the cards, if you will, because if I'm a broker, I'm not doing anything illegal, but if I know you're not going to send it out but every 3 years, I'm not saying we shouldn't set that up front, but I think we need to be unpredictable as a board when we might choose and when we might not. Let's set up a schedule, move forward with it. You have to start somewhere, but it's subject to change, just to ensure that no one is able to lock in and say, okay, this board is going to do this one every 2 years or every 5 years, so maybe I can pad it a little more, if you will. So those are really my only thoughts right now. Other than that, I think it would just, the discussion might lead wherever it leads if we are able to have a work session or discuss it more with you individually or however you want to do it.
I think, Susan, did we not provide them a list of all the contracts at
Yeah.
what, 100,000 and more? So maybe in the next few days, we can re-email that contract, that list back out to you. And if there's one or two, let's kind of get them in a ranking maybe and get to work on that. This one just took a lot longer and was more intense than I thought. And I think it went really, really well, so I'd like to copy and do that. But, so yes, I do agree that you should periodically check and do things, and not necessarily every 3 years. I think some of it is in discussions with department heads and stuff. If we realize something's not working with our vendors, we do bring them in. Charles and I have talked to several of them, had discussions with them and stuff like that, trying to fix whatever problems first. But if we don't meet our satisfactions, there's probably some other ones I may be bringing to bid for y'all that you may not know about right this moment. But
And the only thing I would add to that is, monetary value has a value, but there's a value of how do we work with staff? What's our efficiencies? And I think Ms. Mabry had brought up before, for instance, when things were constantly changing to do our annual audit, some of that was a disaster, and then we found an audit firm, not that gives us an easy time, but they're maybe more efficient or we can follow their protocols. So to me, yes, I want to save money where we can, but the bottom monetary line is not always necessarily what you're looking at
it's
either.
the service you want to for the
So-
dollar. So Susan, we'll get that sent back out to y'all tomorrow or the next day. We're short on staff this week. So we'll get that sent back out to you. If there's one particular one that just hits you because it's your expertise or something doesn't look right to you, then I'll be happy to go back and figure out when they do their bidding or when their bids come into us and back the timeline out. But
One
the
thing-
property and casual is definitely starting July.
One thing too is the timeline is, we've got SPOS education, we gotta start digging
Yes.
here pretty quick.
Yes.
And you don't have time to do a lot of,
It's amazing how much little time we have sometimes in a day. So, but that is, right now, you're right, Tommy, that is the most important thing, is working on educating the public on the continuation of SPLOST, and there again, really, we've been so lucky all these years, and the amount of projects that we have gotten done for the county, and that's going to be around the corner, March 16th. So, and as y'all see, I gave y'all some dates of some important things we're going to be talking about, so I'm keeping y'all organized.
Yeah.
So, but yes, if there's any other ones, I'd be happy to look into those. But I know Charles and I've talked about a couple of them too that we're going to be looking at, and so yes. But I think if you liked the process the way it went this last time, I was very pleased with it too.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Okay, at this time, I will ask for a motion and a second for adjournment.
Motion. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor? Any opposed?